A woman goes for a bike ride on Mother's Day and never comes home. It's May 10th, 2020. A small mountain community in Chaffee County, Colorado. Her helmet turns up 4 days later on the side of a highway. Her bike is found at the bottom of a hill, thrown there. The deputy who found it said it looked like it had been put there on purpose. But her sunglasses, her hydration pack, the gear she never left home without when cycling, those were sitting inside her car in the garage. She never went for that ride. Somebody just needed people to think she did. Her name was Suzanne Morphew. She was 49 years old, a mother of 2, a cancer survivor, and by all accounts one of those people who radiated warmth wherever she went. Friends said you didn't just see beauty when Suzanne was around. You felt it. 3.5 years after she vanished, her remains were found in a shallow clandestine grave in the Colorado desert, 45 miles from home, moved there from somewhere else. Her death was ruled a homicide, and the drug found in her bones was not something you'd find in any pharmacy. It was a chemical used to sedate wild animals, the kind of thing very few private citizens could ever get their hands on. Her husband Barry Morphew has been charged with her murder. He pleaded not guilty. His trial is set for October 2026. And this case, after 5 years, 2 prosecutions, a disbarred DA, and more twists than most crime writers would dare invent, is finally heading before a jury. But we are not waiting for the verdict. Today we're looking at the evidence and asking what most likely happened to Suzanne Morphew. Who were these people? Suzanne and Barry Morphew grew up in Alexandria, Indiana, and had known each other since high school. They married in August 1994. By 2018, they had relocated from Indiana to a property at 19057 Puma Path near Maysville, Colorado, a remote stretch in the Rockies, surrounded by mountains, not much in the way of neighbors. They had 2 daughters, Mallory, born 1999, and Macy, born 2003. Barry ran a landscaping and contracting business. He was also a former deer farmer, and that detail is going to matter a lot. Suzanne had battled follicular lymphoma twice and had been in complete remission since fall 2019, receiving maintenance chemotherapy. She was in good health. She had plans. She was not a woman preparing to disappear. The marriage, though, was in serious trouble. Suzanne told her sister Melinda in the days before she vanished, "It's hard dealing with the harsh abrasiveness and having to show respect. He's been so abusive, emotionally and physically." On May 6th, just 4 days before she was reported missing, she texted Barry directly. "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." There was also someone else. Suzanne had reconnected with a high school classmate, Jeff Libler, a married businessman from Michigan, in September 2018. What started as a LinkedIn message escalated into a full romantic relationship. WhatsApp conversations, phone calls, at least 6 in-person meetings across New Orleans, Dallas, Michigan, and Florida. Suzanne was deeply in love. On May 7th, 2020, 3 days before she vanished, she wrote Libler, "Nobody loves you like the way I do. You're my guy. Always." They talked about getting married, moving to Ecuador, starting over. She was planning to leave Barry once Macy finished high school. She just needed a little more time. Saturday, May 9th, the day that actually matters. This is where the official timeline and the prosecution's theory diverge in a really important way. Suzanne was reported missing on May 10th, Mother's Day, but investigators believe she died the day before. On the afternoon of May 9th, Suzanne was home alone, exchanging messages with Jeff Libler. At 2:03 p.m., she sent him a selfie, sunbathing outside, relaxed. At 2:11 p.m., a final message. He's headed home. I'll be spotty. I love you deeply, babe. She never sent another message. Not to Libler, not to anyone. At 2:26 p.m., Barry texted Suzanne from his truck. "Did you leave?" No response. His phone placed him arriving home at 2:44 p.m. What happened next, according to investigators, was captured in his phone's own movement data. his device bouncing erratically around the property in patterns consistent with someone running. At 2:47 p.m., Barry's phone went into airplane mode. It would stay dark for nearly 8 hours. He later told investigators he'd been outside shooting chipmunks. Mother's Day, the performance. The next morning, Barry claimed to leave home around 5 a.m. for a landscaping job in Broomfield, roughly 3 hours north of Maysville. He texted Suzanne at 6:10 a.m. "Yuupp, happy Mother's Day. I love you." Another text around 8:41 a.m. saying he'd arrived. Prosecutors believe these messages were sent to a woman he already knew was dead. Co-worker Morgan Gentile would later tell investigators something that became one of the more uncomfortable details in this case. The Broomfield job hadn't even been scheduled until May 11th. Barry showed up a day early, alone, without proper equipment, and spent less than 30 minutes at the actual worksite. What he did do was make 5 separate stops to throw things away. An RTD bus stop dumpster off Highway 36, the Holiday Inn Express where he was staying, a McDonald's trash can, a Men's Warehouse parking lot where he sat for 40 minutes before discarding something, another dumpster nearby. He gave investigators inconsistent accounts of what he was getting rid of. Hotel surveillance cameras captured Barry entering the lobby, carrying 2 shovels. Co-worker Jeff Puckett, who moved into Barry's hotel room after him, told investigators it smelled strongly of chlorine and was littered with wet towels and ripped-up documents that appeared insurance-related. Back in Chaffee County, Suzanne's daughters Mallory and Macy, away on a church camping trip, couldn't reach their mother and asked a neighbor, Jean Ritter, to check on her. The house was empty. Jean's husband Marty called Barry. Barry told him Suzanne had gone for a bike ride. He told them to call 911. Nobody ever saw Suzanne leave for that ride. The search, the bike, and what the dogs told us. Suzanne's blue mountain bike was found off County Road 225, thrown down a steep hillside. The first deputy on scene noted it looked like it had been placed there deliberately. Her helmet turned up 4 days later, nearly a mile away, about 10 meters off Highway 50. Her sunglasses and hydration pack, items she always wore on rides, were inside her Range Rover in the garage. A tracking dog named Roscoe did not alert to Suzanne's scent at the bike location. He tracked back toward the house. The picture building was not of a woman who went out for a ride. It was of a scene that had been set up to look like one. Investigators searched the Morphew property and found something in the family's clothes dryer, among shorts Barry had reportedly been wearing on May 9th. A needle sheath cap from a tranquilizer dart. They also found, in a locked garage safe, a tranquilizer rifle and empty tranquilizer darts. Barry Morphew was a former deer farmer. He had a history of purchasing and using a wildlife chemical immobilizer called BAM, a combination of butorphanol, azaparone and medetomidine, to sedate and move animals. His last documented prescription purchase was in Indiana in 2018. But he admitted to investigators he had used BAM in Colorado as recently as April 2020, 1 month before Suzanne disappeared, to tranquilize a deer near the house. The body, the bones, and the autopsy. For 3 years there was no body. The Chaffee County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation searched extensively. Nothing. Then, on September 22, 2023, investigators searching for an unrelated missing woman named Edna Quintana near the town of Moffett in Saguache County stumbled upon human remains in a shallow grave by the side of Highway 17, roughly 45 miles south of the Morphew home. The remains were positively identified as Susan on September 27th via dental records. She was still wearing her bike clothing. Some foot bones and bicycle shoes were missing. The bones were significantly bleached. A forensic anthropologist, botanist, and entomologist concluded that the body had decomposed somewhere else before being moved here. There was no evidence of insect activity or animal predation at the gravesite, consistent with the time she'd been missing. Suzanne's body had been relocated. According to the 2025 grand jury indictment, it had been moved at least twice. The April 2024 autopsy formally ruled her death a homicide. The cause? homicide by undetermined means in the setting of butorphanol, azaparone, and medetomidine intoxication. All 3 BAM chemicals were detected in her femur bone marrow. Critically, testing showed the drugs had begun to metabolize before she died, meaning Suzanne survived the initial dose long enough for her body to start processing it. She was sedated, and she did not survive it. The legal saga. Barry was first arrested in May 2021 and charged with first-degree murder. The original case, handled by DA Linda Stanley of the 11th Judicial District, fell apart spectacularly. CBI analysis had found unknown male DNA on multiple locations. The glove box and back seat of Suzanne's Range Rover, and the handlebars, seat and grips of her bike. Both Barry and Jeff Libler were excluded as contributors. When run through CODIS, a partial match from the glove box returned hits linked to 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Arizona and Illinois. This evidence was never disclosed in the 129-page arrest affidavit. The judge who signed the warrant wasn't told it existed. When the defense eventually discovered the suppression, the judge imposed devastating sanctions, barring 11 of 16 prosecution expert witnesses. 9 days before trial was set to begin, DA Stanley moved to dismiss all charges. The aftermath was damaging for the prosecution's office in a way that's hard to overstate. Linda Stanley was disbarred in September 2024 by the Colorado Supreme Court, stripped of her law license for withholding exculpatory evidence, making improper public statements on a true crime YouTube channel while the case was active, and launching a baseless investigation into the presiding judge. The court compared her to a ship's captain who never appeared on the bridge. The second prosecution came from a different district entirely. Because Suzanne's body was found in Saguache County, the 12th Judicial District and DA Ann Kelley assumed authority. A grand jury returned a single count of first-degree murder on June 18, 2025. Barry was arrested 2 days later during a traffic stop in Gilbert, Arizona, where he had been living under aliases. He pleaded not guilty on January 12, 2026. Trial is set for October 13, 2026. One more detail worth flagging. In early 2026, Barry signed paperwork authorizing the release and cremation of Suzanne's remains from the El Paso County Coroner's Office. Cremation was scheduled for February 20th. Law enforcement obtained a search warrant and seized the remains from the funeral home 1 day before the scheduled cremation. Prosecutors believe this was an attempt to destroy evidence central to the trial. She was abducted or killed by a stranger. The unknown male DNA is the defense's strongest argument, and it can't just be waved away. DNA from an unidentified male was found on Suzanne's car and bike. Partial CODIS matches to unsolved sexual assault cases in Arizona and Illinois introduced the possibility, however remote, that someone else was involved. Someone with a history of predatory violence. The problem is what this theory requires you to believe. It requires a stranger to have tranquilized Suzanne Morphew with an obscure wildlife chemical, the same chemical her husband had just purchased and used on his own property a month earlier, staged a bike scene convincingly enough to fool investigators for 3 years, moved her body at least twice, and disposed of her in a remote desert grave that happened to be in the general direction of Barry's former Indiana roots. And done all of this with 0 witnesses, 0 forensic trace linking anyone else to the property, and 0 explanation for why Barry's phone went dark for 8 hours that afternoon. The 2025 grand jury indictment states investigators identified 3 possible contributors to the unknown DNA and determined none had any involvement in the case. The defense will contest that finding. But as a standalone theory, this one requires an awful lot of coincidences stacking up against a man who was already lying to police. She left voluntarily. This was briefly floated in online spaces early in the case, that Suzanne staged her own disappearance to run away with Jeff Libler, possibly to Ecuador as they discussed. The defense gestured at this possibility during the first prosecution. Judge Patrick Murphy described it as unlikely. The reason it's out. Suzanne's phone went dark the afternoon of May 9th and never came back on. There has been 0 financial activity in her name since that day. She missed a cancer treatment appointment scheduled for May 11th. A woman fighting to stay in remission, who had only recently celebrated completing her treatment, does not skip that appointment. Her remains were found in a shallow grave. She didn't go anywhere voluntarily. A mountain lion or wilderness accident. Barry himself mentioned to a YouTuber that officers had seen a mountain lion near the search area in the early days of the investigation. The implication was that something could have happened to Suzanne on her ride. No blood, no signs of an animal attack. The tracking dog didn't register her scent at the bike site. Her gear was in the garage. Her body had been sedated with a controlled wildlife drug and buried in a grave 45 miles away. This one's off the table. Let's work backwards from what we actually know. Suzanne's body was found in a shallow grave in the Colorado desert, moved there from somewhere else. Moved, according to investigators, at least twice. She had been sedated with a wildlife tranquilizer that her husband, a former deer farmer, had purchased, possessed, and used on his own property as recently as 1 month before she died. Her death was ruled a homicide. The needle sheath cap from a tranquilizer dart was found in the family's clothes dryer, alongside Barry's shorts from that afternoon. His phone went dark for 8 hours on the afternoon of May 9th, the last day anyone ever heard from Suzanne. The stranger theory requires a cascade of coincidences that strain credulity beyond its breaking point. Most critically, it requires someone else to have had access to the same rare chemical Barry had just used on the same property, while Barry happened to be there with his phone in airplane mode. The picture that emerges from the evidence is this. Barry Morphew killed Suzanne on the afternoon of May 9th, 2020, using a BAM tranquilizer dart. A means of incapacitation he had both the knowledge and the access to deploy. The prosecution's theory is that he sedated her, that she survived the initial dose long enough for her body to start metabolizing the drug, and that she died on the property. The arrest affidavit described his pattern with Suzanne as one of hunting and controlling, language drawn from interviews with people who knew the couple. When Suzanne made clear she was leaving him, he used the tools he knew. As for motive, everything points in one direction. Suzanne had told her sister she was being abused. She had texted Barry directly that she was done. She had a secret relationship with someone she loved and planned to build a life with. In Colorado, a marital property state, a divorce would have entitled her to a substantial share of everything they'd built together, and Suzanne's siblings noted financial pressure as a significant stressor in the marriage. Barry was a man watching his marriage, his finances, and his control over his family slip away simultaneously. What the evidence suggests is that he decided to stop it. The staging tells its own story. The bike was driven to County Road 225 and thrown down a hillside. The helmet was left nearly a mile away on the opposite side of a highway. None of Suzanne's actual riding gear made it to the scene. The phone went silent the previous afternoon. The fake texts on Mother's Day morning, "Happy Mother's Day, I love you," were sent to a woman investigators believe was already dead. Then came the 5 dumpster stops, the shovels, the chlorine-scented hotel room, the ripped-up insurance documents. These are not the actions of a grieving husband. They are the actions of someone managing a problem. And then the body. Suzanne was buried in Saguache County, 45 miles from home. And then, evidence suggests, moved again. The proximity to Barry's route between Colorado and Indiana, where he had roots, has been noted. The shallow grave was not discovered for 3.5 years, and only then by accident. Prosecutors allege that when the case was reopened in 2025 and trial became inevitable, Barry took steps to have Suzanne's remains cremated, which would have destroyed the toxicological evidence in her bones that forms the core of the prosecution's case. A court order stopped it with 1 day to spare. The unknown DNA is a genuine question that deserves to remain open. It hasn't been fully explained in any way that's publicly verifiable. The defense will press on it hard in October. But it doesn't change the weight of what points at Barry. The access to the drug, the needle cap, the 8-hour blackout, the staged scene, the shovels, the dumpster runs, the fake texts, the body moved at least twice, and the near cremation of the evidence. Suzanne Morphew was sedated and killed in her own home on the afternoon of May 9th, 2020, the day before the Mother's Day she never got to spend with her daughters. The most likely person responsible is the man who had exclusive access to the weapon, who spent that afternoon with his phone in airplane mode, and who spent the following day driving across Colorado, disposing of whatever needed to disappear. The trial begins in October 2026. We'll be watching. What do you guys think? Does the BAM evidence nail this case, or does the unknown DNA introduce enough doubt that this could go either way? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know where you're landing on this one. If you have any information related to the death of Suzanne Morphew, contact the Saguache County Sheriff's Office or the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. And if you want to follow along when this one actually goes to trial, stay subscribed. When this one breaks, we'll be here. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there.